In addition to text fields, checkboxes, selection menus, and other form elements, an HTML form usually contains different types of buttons. Reset buttons clear a form so it can be refilled out. Submit buttons allow the user to submit the filled-in form to the server or to an email address for processing. Your forms will generally contain at least one form submit button, so the form can be sent. Authors can create three types of buttons then. Submit buttons. When activated, a submit button submits a form. A form may contain more than one submit button. You can also create reset buttons. When activated, a reset button resets all controls to their initial values. The third type of button are generic push buttons. These buttons won't do anything unless you write some code around them, for example, using the onClick method to call some JavaScript. Each push button may have client-side scripts associated with the element's event attributes. When an event occurs, such as the user pressing the button or releasing the button, the associated script will be triggered. Authors would then specify the scripting language of a push button script through a default script declaration using a meta element. Let's review first the send or submit button, as I have here in the form_basic.htm file in the work files folder. These buttons usually send the form data to the script that was specified in the action attribute of the form tag. In this case, the action is just sending this to my website, to a subfolder called prog, P-R-O-G, /add user. More on methods of processing the form data after the user presses the send or submit button a little bit later in this tutorial. You can use an optional name attribute to provide a name for the button. And the value attribute here, I've set this to just to send, specifies the value associated with this button. This value will also be the text label that appears on the button. Notice that that value, send, equals the name of the button right there. So if we change this to submit, like so, the button label also changes. Let's go ahead and add a capital S on that submit, like so. The submit button behaves a bit like a checkbox in that the button's value itself is sent as a form field named after the button's name. So if your button was called send form and had a value of send now, then the form field send form having a value send now would be sent to the server along with the rest of the submitted form data. Next is the reset button. The reset button is used to reset the contents of the form to their original values. This means that each form field will change back to the value it had when the form loaded. This will either be null or empty, or the default value set with the value attribute. If we look at our form here, notice that I've partially filled out the form. If I click on the reset button, all the form elements go back to their original values. Notice that the last name, the original value was last name here. And the reason for that is that this form field has an initial value equal to last name here. As with the submit button, if you assign a value to the reset button, put that in quotation marks, then that will be the name on the button. Notice that this has been renamed from reset to redo based on my value setting there. Let's now move on to the next movie and review image buttons and general form buttons.